Welcome back to another episode of the Brazen Podcast. Today, we are going to talk with you about how to build a healthy work culture. So, this could be from the entrepreneurial side or business owner side, or it could just be from a management perspective or just being like seen as a leader on a team, whether you have the title or not. Because I think I speak for both Valerie and I when I say that you don't have to have a title to be a leader. And oftentimes, the leadership that you can do from within a team as a fellow teammate can have a huge impact, like sometimes even bigger than the people with the title could have on the team. So, we're going to kind of go into 5 different ways that you can start building a healthier culture within your workplace or within your business. So, I'm going to kick it off with number 1. One of the biggest things that you can do as a leader is to take care of yourself. Because if you are stressed out, burned out, exhausted, just not feeling your best, then that's how you're going to show up at work, whether you intend to or not. And if you have a leader or a boss who is coming in and just has like a really negative, sour, like not vibrant and excited vibe about them, it's going to bring the whole team down. And what you want to do as a leader is make sure that you know how to regulate your own emotions, because that is what's going to help you fulfill your full potential as a leader, be an effective leader, and it's going to bring your whole team up to meet you, as opposed to you guys all just kind of wallowing in this pit of negative toxicity all the time. I'm sure we've all worked in workplaces where there's just been like a generally negative tone, and it's not a pleasant place to work. Like, you don't want to come to work and you don't want to go above and beyond. Whereas when you're working in a really positive environment for somebody who is like present, and you can tell that they enjoy their job and they're happy to be there, and they're not overly stressed out, and they know how to handle the little fires that you need to put out day to day, or the little bumps in the road that happen, and it doesn't like completely send them flying off the handle, then that's a good person to work for. Like, that's a place that you want to stick around, and you're going to be putting in more effort, and like, you're going to just try that much harder to go above and beyond if that is who you're working for. So, some tips just within this first bullet point to get a little bit better regulated, or a feel for how regulated you are, is like just sitting down and being quiet with yourself for a few minutes and asking yourself, how do I feel right now? And if you have kind of been living in a go go state, your answer is probably going to be something like, I feel really stressed. I feel tired. I feel like I don't want to do anything anymore, like, period. All of those things are probably signs that you are either in or on your way to burning out. And it's really important for you to get a handle on that, because if you can realize that you are not in a good place and like get the perspective that you need in order to be able to determine that, then you're going to be able to start taking those tiny steps to like get yourself out of that place and to higher ground almost. Because I think the drowning analogy is like what a lot of people relate to as far as burnout goes. Like it feels like you're just treading water, trying not to drown on a day-to-day basis. So getting to higher ground is the goal. So little things like, incorporating 5 minutes of self-care into your morning and your nightly routines, taking like a 5 or 10 minute break midday, like during your lunch break or something, where you can totally just disengage from whatever you're doing and switch gears, like go outside, take a walk, get some fresh air, like get some sunshine on your face. Things like that are going to really help you to re-regulate and ground yourself so you're not in a perpetually frazzled and disheveled mental state every single day. And I can talk more about that. So if that is something that like sounds interesting to you as you're listening to this, let us know, like send us a message or send us an email and say that you want to know more about how to regulate yourself, because I can definitely do more stuff on that topic. So let us know.
Yeah, I think that that is so important. I think we forget that the energy we bring to the day is honestly how the day unfolds for ourselves as well as everyone around us. So, like, if you are already, you wake up and you're just like, I'm in a horrible mood, I didn't get enough sleep, I'm just not feeling it. And then you go into work, like, everything's going to annoy you and piss you off,
It's true.
and you're just going to keep feeding into that energy. And I do think it's really important. I obviously, of course, as usual, don't have the reference, but it was the concept or the analogy of a glass of water. And if you kind of want your glass to be full, because those are the resources that you pull from throughout the day. But like if you didn't get enough sleep the night before, your glass might only be half full. So that's all the energy you have to kind of devote to all of the problems that happen throughout the day. And I just really love that analogy because I'm thinking to myself, like, when I want to stay up really late, like, no, I don't want to bring that energy to work the next day. So I need to make sure that I'm like replenishing my cup and all of that. And that, analogy really kind of made it stick for me. In the past, we've also talked to people about your like positivity bank account. So if you aren't doing stuff to sort of sustain yourself, like you're essentially just pulling from that bank account anytime something happens at work that's negative. And, but if you never replenish it with any sort of positive things for yourself and self-care, then you're just constantly kind of overdrafting from your bank
Mm,
account. And so I think just thinking about the fact that it is super important that you recognize that self-care is a part of being a good leader. It's not just this sort of fuzzy thing that everyone's talking about nowadays. It truly is something that helps you to be a good leader.
yeah, totally.
Number 2 is to set a psychologically safe work environment. And essentially, this means that you create an environment where it's okay for people to make mistakes or be vulnerable. And I think this is something that can be a huge make or break thing as a leader because essentially people are always going to make mistakes. But if you don't create a psychologically safe work environment, they're just going to force those mistakes underground. And so you're
Mm,
never going to grow as a team because you're never going to constructively take apart that particular mistake and figure out how to kind of fail up from that and prevent it from happening in the future. So it is something where if you create an environment of fear and repercussions for people being honest, then you're going to have a team that never brings any sort of constructive value to the business. So it is really important to not sort of look for a culprit every time a mistake is made. It's just like, okay, what would we have done differently in this situation? Or if someone in particular didn't handle a situation right, you can even say, like, how would you have handled it differently? Or as a team, what can we do to prevent this from ever happening again? And just kind of asking a lot of almost curious questions around the situation as opposed to just being like, wow, you really messed up and just nothing coming from it. So it's just really important to kind of set that tone from the beginning. And part of that is by being vulnerable as a leader yourself and saying, oh, wow, I just had a really bad customer interaction, or I feel really embarrassed about how I handled that situation. Let's talk about like what you guys would have done differently in that role. And I think it just kind of sets the tone that it's okay to have those conversations.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because, you can talk to your team about the importance of, making mistakes and learning
Mhm.
from them and all that. But if they don't see you doing the same thing, then they're going to pay more attention to the fact that, like, okay, Valerie is saying that it's okay to make mistakes, but
Mhm.
we all know that she royally effed this up and she's not saying anything about it. And she's acting like nothing went wrong or she's blaming other people for it. So, like, as a leader, you want to almost be the first one to
Mhm.
accept responsibility for, things that didn't go the way that you thought they would, or, for mistakes that were made. And almost like just use yourself as a tool to show the rest of your team that, like, you're acknowledging that you made a mistake and it's not like a make or break thing for you. Like, it is an opportunity to learn and to grow and to, like, take in all that new information that you learned and rework your system or your strategy or whatever it is. So, yeah,
I
that's
think
an important piece of it too.
I think too, if you look back and sort of company growth, I think a lot of growth comes from those periods when you have made a mistake and you've been able to kind of put a system in place that will prevent that from happening in the future. And then suddenly you have this system that's kind of moving the business forward. And I think it can be like pretty amazing to see. And then I think the other piece is one place you can be the most vulnerable is we've all had interactions with a staff member where we're not super proud of ourselves and it didn't end well. You can still feel the tension. And I think going back to the employee and saying, I'm so sorry. I was really snappy in that moment. What I was saying is this. I'm really sorry about how that came about and kind of, basically taking responsibility for how that situation unfolded is a really great way to be like, it's okay to make mistakes. I'm
Mhm.
coming back to you in a very vulnerable state, but, I think it shows a lot of power too as a leader, but
Yeah, and, like, I just saw something right before we started recording from Mel Robbins, who's
mhm,
talking about confidence and how confidence is, like, your willingness to try new things and knowing that the more things you try and the more things that don't work, like, you're not gonna die,
mhm.
and it's just an opportunity to gather more information and try things differently the next time. And I think that what a true leader really wants is to build their confidence or build, no, let me back up. Elevate, please edit that. What a true leader wants to do is build the confidence of their team members or their, the people reporting to them. Because if you have a bunch of people who aren't confident and who are afraid to try new things because they're afraid to make mistakes and get, like, chewed out for it, then your team is not going to thrive. Your team is not going to perform well. And there's going to be such a low degree of psychological safety there that, like, if one bad thing happens, your entire team is just gonna crumble, like, your morale
Mhm.
is just gonna be terrible. So, building confidence is really all about encouraging trying new things and encouraging mistakes. Like, what would it look like, I wonder, if more businesses and teams took on, like, a almost like a Silicon Valley type of an approach to making, like, mistakes and trying new things. Like, I've heard of companies in Silicon Valley that are like, you have a weekly quota or something of, like, you need to show that you tried X number of things and you failed X number of times, because that shows that you are, like, thinking outside the box and you're trying new things, and, like, there is no, like, penalty toward making mistakes like that because that's how you grow. So
Yeah.
what would it look like if more businesses took that approach? Like, I think that would be really cool.
Yeah. Number 3 is to not be a good vibes only workplace, but also not a workplace that is super, super toxic in terms of the negativity. And I think that we all kind of recognize the role that negativity plays when you have one team member that is super, super negative and it kind of just like affects everything you do. But there's also the reverse where good vibes only can be really toxic to the workplace because essentially you're saying to people, if you're struggling, we don't really want to know about it. It's a little
Yeah.
bit like, hey, just put on a smile and, dry your tears and it's good vibes only. And I think it's not constructive at all to kind of have that mindset, and it forces people to go underground with their emotions. And, frankly, we're all people, we have emotions, we're not robots. We need to be able to have sort of a healthy communication around those emotions. And I think that the good vibes only thing, just like I said, forces people underground with their issues that they're having and doesn't allow them to kind of let them out in a healthy way.
Yeah, and kind of like we were talking about with the last point, if you have a workplace that's really focused on like being positive to the detriment of like anybody who's feeling a not so positive emotion doesn't feel like they can be open about that versus the other end of the spectrum, like neither of those options are good for psychological safety. Like you want to
Mhm.
be somewhere in the middle where people are allowed to feel and experience the full spectrum of
Mhm.
emotions. Of course, like there's always going to be the expectation of the way that you behave needs to be professional and respectful. Like you can't just be like, I'm in a bad mood and like, berate everybody around you and be like, well, it's not a good vibes only thing. We're being real here. Like,
Yeah.
there's a difference.
Yeah.
But I think as a leader, that's another really important reason that you need to get comfortable with feeling your own emotions and being
Mm.
open with yourself first. Because if you personally are uncomfortable with different emotions, whether it be anger or resentment or sadness or, grief, anything like that, if you're uncomfortable with it, then your team is going to kind of pick up on that and they're not going to feel comfortable coming to you because you're not going to know how to support them in that because you're not even comfortable feeling it yourself. So this is like a little bit off topic, and we're not going to dive too far into this today, but it's why I think that it is so important that as a leader, you're doing your own self healing because we all kind of like, we don't make it to adulthood unscathed. All of us have our issues. And so making sure that you're becoming aware of the things where you're kind of falling short and learning how to compensate for that and get comfortable with, the full spectrum of your emotions. And that's really going to help you not just be a good leader, but like get to the next level and be a great leader that people love to work for.
Yeah, and I think that also on the negativity piece, it's a good reminder to allow staff to come to you as a leader if they need to talk about something that happened, but also making sure that you're not encouraging nonstop venting. There is this thing where, a tiny bit of venting, like less than 5 minutes, might be good to get it off their chest. But at a certain point, it becomes just like reliving the situation. So I think that, providing healthy outlets for people to talk about sort of a traumatic customer interaction or, whatever it was is good. But then you as a manager need to turn it into something constructive and not allow it to become this ongoing negative experience for that employee. So like asking questions or like, what do you think we could have done differently in this situation? Kind of going back to the initial thing, like, how can we fix this so it doesn't happen again? Or what do you need? Do you need a vitamin D break to, go outside and get some sunshine to kind of get over this, but being proactive about the solution instead of just like letting it go on and on forever.
Yeah. And that's like a beautiful segue into point number 4, because that is engaging in healthy and vulnerable conversations. So, Val, could you explain a little bit from your perspective, like what exactly does that mean and how can we start doing more of that?
So I think there are 2 points with this. First off, it's just the communication that happens kind of on the day-to-day basis with your staff or whoever you're working with, in which you're coaching them and you're giving them feedback. And I think that a lot of times when I've worked with coaching managers in the past, they've said, I hate conflict and I don't, I just get really uncomfortable. And it's like, I want people to reframe this type of communication as coaching and not conflict, telling someone that, hey, this is actually how we do something, or let me show you a more efficient way of doing this is not conflict. It's just feedback. And it's basically you are giving them the tools to do their job in the most successful way possible, which is going to lead to them being happier in the workplace. But then the second one is you're always, as a leader, you're very likely going to have a couple of uncomfortable conversations when things do escalate. And I think a key point of that is truly going into the room, recognizing it's two human beings with emotions and getting very comfortable with that. And I think, I've always suggested to managers that they go in with their bullet points that they absolutely feel like they need to cover, but being willing to pivot as the conversation goes. And I think it goes back to the idea of being vulnerable yourself. And if the conversation isn't going well, you can always fix it by pivoting and, asking this person, like, if they need a break, like, if there's a better time to talk about this, or just kind of really reading the room and the person you're with instead of just being like, I'm going full force ahead with these uncomfortable topics and I'm not going to even like pay attention to the person even though they're crying. Like they're not going to receive that if you're not receptive to their emotions and kind of how they're receiving the information. And it's always like helpful to kind of pause a little bit and say like, I feel like this isn't going how I wanted. Like, I really want to help you by giving you these points. And is there a better way that I can present this material, or kind of making them a participant in the conversation? So there's always ways you can shift if you're feeling like it's not happening how you expected it to.
Yeah. And just to go back to the like being afraid of conflict, I personally can really identify with that. And I think there's a lot of people, especially if you have like some perfectionist type
Mhm.
tendencies, or if you are a people pleaser, fear of conflict really, that's like a super deep rooted wound, I guess, inside
Mhm.
you, because a lot of times there's stuff that happened in your past where it like made you fearful for one reason or another over what would happen when somebody got angry or is starting to
Mhm.
feel dysregulated, and it makes you feel unsafe, so you start to avoid conflict like the plague because you just subconsciously feel really unsafe when somebody starts expressing those emotions that you interpret as dangerous. So I promise I did not plan on like really just diving into all of these like neurosomatic things today and healing, but that is another reason that it's really important for leaders to do their own work, because I can speak from my own experience. Like when I was somebody's boss and a leader in one of my past workplaces, this is something that I struggled with big time. And it really held me back because I would go out of my way to avoid having those tough conversations with people. And so, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what's going to happen when you just ignore the little issues. Like it turns
Mhm.
into big issues and then it turns into a bigger confrontation or conversation. And then it's like less what I want to be doing. And so it just like snowballs. So part of being a really effective leader is getting comfortable with other people's uncomfortable emotions, and also kind of, being really clear in your boundaries and reframing it mentally from like, this is not a conflict, and like you're almost like going into it assuming based on all your past experiences that this
Mhm.
is going to turn into a conflict, but reframing it mentally, which takes a lot of work and like rewiring in your brain to do this, but changing that thought process from like, this isn't a confrontation, this is a conversation on how I can better support you. And it's going to be so much better received by the person sitting on the other end of the table because like you're not coming into it with like that nervous, like keyed up, like I'm getting ready for battle type of energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I've always just reframed it to myself that I owe it to the staff. I think, you're just
Yeah.
setting them up for failure if you're not willing to have the conversations. It's your responsibility to make sure that they're getting the information they need. And
Mm,
so when you frame it that way, it's like, okay, like if I'm not doing it, this is a disservice to the employees.
yeah, totally. Last but not least is creating systems and clear expectations so that people are comfortable with what their job requires. Val, what are your thoughts on that first?
This is something I love talking about. I feel like I say that about every
Girl,
topic,
same.
but
Okay,
I
so like
really, truly love this.
systems are like
I
perfect for me. I love it.
I was gonna say this is definitely your wheelhouse. I think that for me, creating systems and expectations. So first off, expectations are just it's another thing that you can do to encourage staff to succeed. And there's no way for them to know kind of the path forward if they don't know what the expectations are of them. And it can feel very unsafe if they go into a job very loose and not knowing exactly what their leaders want from them. And so I think being very clear with expectations, systems are a way to take a lot of the decision making stress out of their day-to-day job and also just brain power, whether for yourself or for the staff. Systems mean that you don't have to rethink or recreate the wheel every time you do the same task. And I think that removing that sort of brain power allows people to work more towards basically growing the business instead of spending all this brain power on, okay, wait, what was I supposed to do? Oh, yeah, how do I do this again? What are the
Mhm.
steps? And so a system just means that you have a more efficient running of your business and allowing for more growth.
Yeah, like I love the idea of having standard operating
Mhm.
procedure typed up because, for one, it makes it so easy to onboard a new hire because it's like, okay, you walk them through the process once and you're like, okay, and here is a database of all of our processes broken down step by step. And if you inevitably need to refer back to them because who can remember everything on the first week of the job, like they can refer back to that. And it kind of empowers them, I think, to be able to find the answers that they need on their own. And it also really cuts down on the mental load of those around them, whether it be you or some other team member having to stop whatever they're doing and like explain it, re-show it, all that kind of stuff. And they're not a sponsor or anything of this podcast, but there's an app or like a Chrome extension called Scribe, and you can install it and it makes it super easy to make standard operating procedures because you turn it on and then you just do the process yourself. Like you go through all the clicks and it can take like screenshots and stuff like that. And then it puts it into a document step by step for you. So check that out if that is something that you need in your life. But I also just wanted to go back to the clear expectations thing. So, like, story time. In one of my jobs, I was working in kind of like a multidisciplinary team. So, like, we all had really different job descriptions and like scopes of like what our job required of us. And for so many things within our workplace, the expectation was, well, we're a team. Like we help each other out to get this done. And I don't think that it is just me being type A, but that doesn't work in a workplace. That does not work. Teamwork is great, but people need to be responsible. There needs to be like a point person
Mhm.
for a specific responsibility. Like if there is a report that needs to be put out on a weekly basis, there needs to be like one person who is in charge of meeting that deadline. And of course, other people can contribute to it, but it's like one person is in charge of making sure that it gets out on time. That way, it's like very obvious that if it doesn't happen, that's the person that you talk to be like, let's talk about what happened here. And like my experience was when it was like, everybody's job to do X, Y, and Z because we're a team. It never happened and it never got done. And when it did, it was always the same people doing everything, which breeds
Mhm.
resentment and negative feelings and toxicity and kills the morale. So don't make that mistake. Just make sure that you have clearly outlined responsibilities for like every process in your business. Like somebody needs to be explicitly responsible for it.
Yeah, I always think that if there isn't a particular owner, there's basically no owner to a
Yeah.
project because everyone could be like, wait, I didn't think that was my responsibility. And you just
Yeah.
need one person who can kind of take on that and they can delegate or, kind of gather what they need from everyone else. But yeah, no, I'm a huge proponent of ownership over things and
Yeah.
being able to kind of delegate that stuff out. So,
And like, what are your thoughts on how, like, if there's a project and you say, well, it's like two people who are basically in charge of this. Like, what's your feeling on having like two owners for a job?
yeah, I'm still not into it. That might be my type A. I think that there still should always be one person kind of
Mhm.
solely responsible, just because I think unless you are very explicit about what their expectations are, separately, I just, first of all, I also don't agree with kind of two people doing the same job. Like, I think it's very inefficient, but I also think that it makes it super blurry for them, like who takes on what. And then they have to spend all this time sort of deciding who's going to take what part of each project. And yeah, I'm not into it.
Yeah, I feel you. That was kind of my take on it too. So there you have it. That's 5 different ways that you can work on building a healthier work culture or business if you're an entrepreneur. So we talked about a couple of different resources for you, but I just really want to call out one in particular, and that is if you need help with establishing systems, expectations, anything like that, Valerie is taking on coaching clients. And so she can really help you to dive into the business side of things and make sure that your mindset is in the right place and like you're ready to grow and scale your business if that's the point that you're ready for. And on the other hand, if you're interested in learning how to become a more regulated and self-possessed leader or entrepreneur, I am also taking on clients at the time of this recording. And so you can send us an email. It's going to be linked in the show notes at the bottom of the page here. And just send us an email and let us know that you're interested in exploring what coaching might be like, and we'll work with you on figuring that out. But Valerie and I are just really passionate about helping female business owners and female leaders learn how to really step into their power and create a super impactful business and creating a lifestyle that supports you and your passion and your business. So let us know, send us a message if that sounds like something that you want to explore. Until next time, we will talk to you later and keep being brazen.